Hey, so I want to share with you exactly what I did to get emotionally sober and what I do to stay emotionally sober. So I hit an emotional rock bottom when I was 3 years sober. My life was so much better. I had a career instead of a job. I was working as a psychotherapist. And that's kind of important because I was working as a professional, like helping people. Like I had all the theory in my head. I had a car. I had never had a car before. I had a flat, friends, social life. Life was just so much better. However, I was incapable of having a romantic relationship, just incapable. I had a pattern where I would attract a man and we would have this really intense relationship, and I would think, this is it. And then I would always be left and abandoned. And I had that pattern when I was drinking, and I had that pattern when I was sober. And that was what was really scary because when I was drinking, I mean, I was chaotic and I didn't know anything. But when I was sober, I was a therapist. I understood about attachment theory and the relationship cycle. Like I knew it, but I couldn't stop it happening. So when I was about 3 years sober, I got into a relationship, same pattern, really intense, thought this was it, it was wonderful. And then it was like 8 to 10 weeks was typically, I would always choose someone who would just begin to leave me. And this happened, and I went into this black hole of despair, complete desperation. I just felt completely desperate. I was about 30 years old at the time. And, of course, I wanted to settle down and have a family. But I did not know how I was going to live the rest of my life with this amount of pain. Like I just didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to be in this world. So I was like, I just surrendered. There had to be another way. I didn't want to drink. I really didn't want to drink, but I just didn't know how to get through the day anymore. And the only feeling I can tell you, it was just this feeling of utter desperation and loneliness. And I know if you've experienced that, you know what I'm talking about. So I just turbocharged and did everything I could that would help me. And I did it intensively for probably a year. And this is what changed for me. I didn't have a practice to keep me emotionally sober. In fact, I didn't even know what emotional sobriety was at that point. I was sober. I thought I was working a program. I was doing a bit of this and a bit of that. But I really needed like a structure. Like I needed a method. That's what I needed. By the way, if this is resonating with you and you need a method, check the link below. So I I was at the point, right? If you'd have told me, Veronica, every morning stand upside down in a flower pot and sing the national anthem for a year, and at the end of it, you'll be happy and content and life will be really good, I'd have done it. I would have done anything. So we need a method, we need a system, we need a practice, right? It's just like yoga. If you have like you're really stiff and you have a bad back and you go and develop a yoga practice, right? And it takes several months and it's practice and it's tweaking and it's kind of getting the discipline over several months, you'll begin to see a difference. You'll begin to feel better. You'll see how much more flexible you are. Like you'll notice a change. Now, if after a year of doing it and refining it and getting really good at it, if you stopped, you'll just drift back and lose everything that you've gained through doing yoga. It's the same with emotional sobriety. You need to know this. It's not that you come, you do it and you're fixed. It's just like exercise. It's just like yoga. You need to come, you need to learn, you need to do it, and then you need to keep on doing it. Because we have to maintain our physical health, and we have to also maintain our mental and emotional health. And this is what I do. I've done this for 22. I sit down in the morning. I read something that grounds me in personal development. Now, for you, if you're early in your sobriety, I'm going to suggest that you read something that grounds you in sobriety. Over time, that will change. And you just want something that grinds you in spirituality, in personal development, in growth, right? I think you kind of know the thing that I'm talking about. I mean, I'll recommend read my book. read 2 or 3 pages every day. It'll ground you in personal development and sobriety. But there's a ton of other stuff out there as well. Then I have a prayer. I then do structured journaling. If I have a resentment, I write it out. I write out my resentment so I can create a shift in perception. And I'm going to tell you, hands down, this is the thing that will change you. Because all sobriety is a shift in perception, which sounds like a small thing, but it's massive and it will change everything. I just did not, I saw the world one way. I saw, I came from this place of seeing the world that alcohol was the best way to have fun. Well, I didn't believe that anymore. I didn't see it that way. But the way I looked at the world was Veronica is not good enough. Veronica's not worthy of being loved. Veronica's always going to mess up. Things never work out for me, right? That's how it always felt to me. That was my perception of my place in the world. So writing out my resentments, what it does is it began to reveal to me that nothing was personal and that I was interpreting everything that happened in the world to be personal. It wasn't. And I was here it is. I was creating a story that ran my life that wasn't true. And this structured journaling over time began to shift everything. So I'd write out my resentments, I'd write out my fears, and then I'd ask myself, is this true? Is this real? And they began to lose their power over me. I write out any limiting beliefs that I'm working on, and I write 10 things that I'm grateful for. And I've done that for 22 years. Now, at the beginning of that process, I was doing that like pretty much daily. I'd say after I had my kids, I would do it 3, 4, 5 times a week. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. And it has profoundly changed me. Now, this is when I realized it had changed. So I'd come from this black hole of despair. It was a romantic relationship that put me there. I felt desperate, alone, and abandoned. I did this work, and it was about, the 6-month mark. I had this crush on this guy that I worked with. And he was a therapist, and I was a therapist, and I thought that would be, really great. And after a few weeks, I realized he did not see me in that way. He just saw me as a colleague and a friend. And I was walking down the street, and I can still picture it, where I just had this realization that he did not see me in that way. And my next thought was, I wonder what's wrong with him. Like I would make someone a really nice girlfriend. And I stopped dead in the street because up until that moment, I had believed in life that there was something wrong with me, and that feeling had just gone. I just didn't believe it anymore. It wasn't that I believed like I'm just the most amazing, like incredible, perfect person ever. That's silly, right? I just thought I'm all right. I'm just all right. And that was life changing. And that's when I realized how I perceived everything. I just no longer saw that. I just didn't think that. I just didn't believe that I wasn't good enough anymore. It just gone. So interestingly, what happens is, this is important, your brain begins to make this connection with, when I do this stuff, I really like how my day goes. So it becomes, we need disciplines, right? We need disciplines as human beings. We really do. We need that structure and discipline. So my brain had just begun to make this connection, right? When you do this, life goes really well. And that is then incredibly motivating to continue to do it. So I just continued to do it. Now, twice in my sobriety, I stopped doing all of those things. Both times happened after I'd had my kids. I was exhausted, had a new baby, no help, just had loads of excuses why I couldn't even, getting showered was a task. And this sort of went on for a few months. And both times I began to notice that I was feeling more and more uncomfortable in my own skin. See, that is the difference. Before I was emotionally sober, I felt uncomfortable in my own skin all the time. That was my default. That's just how I was. Once I'd done this work, I felt comfortable in my own skin, and that was my default. So when that kind of stopped, and I began to just I just felt uncomfortable with me, I began to see that I wasn't okay and that I had drifted, and I needed to get back to this practice that had served me so well. So both times within, I think, 3 or 4 weeks of going back to my practice that I've just described to you, I just began to feel restored to myself. And you'd think I'd learned the lesson doing it once, but no, I did it twice. And here we are, 22 plus years later, and I still do it. In fact, if I'm going to show you, this is a bit messy than my chair. This is my little chair and table set up right there where I come into my office in the morning and I sit there and it just happens. It just happens. I read something, I write something, and it's like picking weeds out of your mind. That's what you're doing. You're just doing a little bit of weeding, just doing a little bit of weeding and grounding yourself. And this is why you have to continue to do it. Because what happens if you don't keep up with the weeding, right? Your garden will be overgrown. And if you don't ground yourself, will just drift off. It's amazing how human beings do that. So this is why it's a lifelong practice. And honestly, it's a joy. It's easy. This is not hard. It is not hard. Now, from that came things like just being able to have really good boundaries and communication and all of that kind of stuff. If you want to learn how to do this, you need to check out the Sobriety method because I teach it in the program. So this is what I have done. This is what works for me. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below the practices that work for you.